Right after birth, everyone rushed into the room to look at the baby. My sister-in-law grabbed the baby and started snorting. The eyes don't match, even the nose. Wait, let me try fix it. My mother-in-law, standing beside her, said, I knew this whore was carrying someone else's kid. Everyone was stunned, and that's when my sister-in-law started pressing her finger down into my baby's eyes. I looked at my husband and he looked disgusted. How can you do this to me? My own father shouted, Take her out too, we cannot take her to our house. I screamed, and that's when everyone tried to pin me down, but it was too late because one of the nurses had already realized what was going on, so she called the police and had everyone's life turned into hell. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room after the doctor placed my newborn son in my arms. Aiden James Carter. 6 pounds, 8 ounces of pure perfection. His tiny fingers curled around mine as I gazed into his face, memorizing every feature. Dark hair like his father's, my nose, and eyes that were still the cloudy blue of newborns but would likely darken to match his dad's deep brown. He's beautiful, I whispered to my husband, Mark. He leaned down, pressing his lips against my forehead, his eyes filled with tears. Perfect, he agreed. Just perfect, Amanda. The moment was everything I dreamed of during the 9 months of pregnancy. Mark and I had been married for 3 years, and Aiden was our miracle after months of trying. I felt complete, holding my child in this sterile hospital room that somehow felt like the most sacred place on earth. Then the door burst open. Is the baby here? Let me see my grandson. Mark's mother, Diane, swept into the room like a hurricane. Behind her came her daughter Melissa, my father-in-law Richard, and to my surprise, my own parents, my father Gerald and my mother Patricia. I hadn't expected them for another day. I smiled weakly, exhausted from 18 hours of labor but happy to share this moment. Everyone, meet Aiden. They crowded around the bed, cooing and awing. Mark stood beside me, his hand protectively on my shoulder. Then something shifted. Melissa, who had never particularly liked me, reached for the baby. Let me hold him. Before I could respond, she'd already taken Aiden from my arms. I felt a moment of panic, that instinctive new mother fear, but told myself to relax. She was his aunt, after all. Melissa studied Aiden's face, her expression growing stranger by the second. Her lips curved into a smirk as she glanced from the baby to Mark, then back again. The eyes don't match, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Even the nose. Wait, let me try to fix it. Before anyone could react, she pressed her finger down onto my baby's eyelid as if trying to reshape it. Aiden let out a piercing wail. What are you doing? I tried to sit up, reaching for my baby, but my body was still weak from delivery. Mark's mother moved closer, peering at the baby. Her face contorted with disgust. I knew this whore was carrying someone else's kid, she spat. The room went silent except for Aiden's cries. I couldn't process what was happening. These people, family, were suggesting I'd cheated on Mark? That Aiden wasn't his son? Give me my baby, I demanded, my voice trembling with rage and fear. But Melissa was still prodding at Aiden's face, her nail dangerously close to his eye. See? Nothing like Mark. The cheeks, the chin. I looked at Mark, expecting him to defend me, to take our child back from his sister's clutches. But the expression on his face made my blood run cold. He was staring at the baby, at our son, with unmistakable disgust. How could you do this to me? He whispered, stepping away from the bed. Mark, what are you talking about? He's your son, I cried, tears streaming down my face. That's when my own father stepped forward. I expected support, defense, anything but what came next. Take her out too, we cannot take her to our house, he shouted, his face red with anger. My mother stood behind him, silent, her face a mask of disapproval. Dad? I whispered, disbelieving. Melissa was still holding Aiden, who was screaming louder now. I tried to get out of bed, desperate to reclaim my child, but suddenly hands were on me, Mark's father, my own father, pushing me back down. You need to confess, Amanda, Mark growled. Who's the father? Tell me now. You are. I screamed, fighting against their grip. You're his father. I've never been with anyone else. But they weren't listening. Melissa had retreated to a corner with my still crying baby, whispering something to Diane. My father and Mark were shouting. The room was chaos. I didn't see the nurse enter, but suddenly she was there, taking in the scene with wide eyes. What's going on in here? she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. You need to give that baby back to his mother right now. When no one moved, she stepped forward, firmly taking Aiden from Melissa's arms. I'm calling security. And the police. She cheated, Mark yelled. That's not my baby. The nurse cradled Aiden protectively, her eyes flashing with anger. Sir, this is a hospital maternity ward, not a courtroom. And what I just witnessed was assault on both a newborn and a postpartum mother. She pressed a button on the wall, and within moments, 2 security guards appeared. The nurse explained the situation in clipped, professional terms, but I could hear the fury beneath her words. Everyone out except the mother, she ordered. Now. You can't do this, Diane hissed. We have a right. You have no rights here, the nurse interrupted. Leave, or be escorted out. Your choice. As they were ushered toward the door, Mark turned back. This isn't over, Amanda. I was shaking uncontrollably, tears flowing freely as the nurse returned Aiden to me. He had quieted somewhat, but his little face was still red from crying. I'm so sorry, the nurse, her name tag read Sarah, said softly. I've called Dr. Lewis, and she's on her way. We're also notifying the police. The police? I whispered, clutching Aiden to my chest. What they did constitutes assault, Mrs. Carter. And endangerment of a minor. Her face softened. You're not alone in this. We're here to help you both. I nodded numbly, unable to process how my perfect moment had shattered so completely. How could Mark believe I cheated? How could my own parents turn against me? And Melissa, I shuddered remembering her finger pressing on Aiden's eye. Dr. Lewis arrived minutes later, immediately checking Aiden for any injuries. He seems okay, she assured me. But we'll monitor him closely. The police arrived next, 2 officers who spoke gently but took detailed notes. They explained that what had happened constituted multiple crimes, assault on both me and Aiden, attempted kidnapping, and criminal threats. Do you want to press charges? One officer asked. I hesitated, still in shock. Can I decide later? I need to think. Of course. We'll file our report, and you can make that decision when you're ready. After they left, Sarah helped me feed Aiden and get him settled. We're moving you to a secure room, she explained. Limited access, and we'll have security outside your door. Thank you, I whispered, still trembling. I don't understand what happened. Why they would think? People can be irrational, Sarah said carefully. Especially around births. But what they did was inexcusable. That night, alone with Aiden in our new room, reality began to sink in. My marriage was likely over. My relationship with my parents was in tatters. And I had a newborn son to protect. I had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain, life as I knew it had ended the moment Melissa took my baby from my arms. The next morning, Dr. Lewis came to check on us, along with a hospital social worker named Jennifer. We need to discuss your discharge plan, Jennifer said gently. Given the circumstances, we're concerned about your safety. I nodded, Aiden sleeping peacefully in my arms. I can't go home, can I? I wouldn't recommend it, she agreed. Do you have somewhere else you can stay? Friends, other family? I thought about it. My closest friend, Rachel, lived across the country. My cousin Emily was in Chicago, but we weren't particularly close. The truth was, I'd invested everything in my marriage and building relationships with Mark's family. Now that was gone. Not really, I admitted. There are resources available, Jennifer assured me. Temporary housing, legal assistance. And there's something else we should discuss. She exchanged a look with Dr. Lewis, who nodded encouragingly. What is it? I asked, suddenly afraid. Given what your husband and family members were suggesting, we think it would be wise to conduct a paternity test, Dr. Lewis said carefully. Not because we doubt you, but because it would provide legal protection. I felt a flash of indignation, then resignation. Yes, I want that. I know Mark is Aiden's father. Good. We can take samples today, and rush the results. It usually takes a few days. As they were preparing to leave, a knock came at the door. Jennifer moved to answer it, speaking briefly with someone outside before turning back to me. There's a police detective here to see you. Are you up for that? I shifted Aiden to my shoulder. Yes, I want to know my options. Detective Lisa Morgan was a serious-looking woman in her 40s, with kind eyes that belied her no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed what had happened, asking clarifying questions and taking notes. "Mrs. Carter, I've reviewed the hospital security footage," she said finally. "What happened in that room was criminal: assault on both you and your infant son, unlawful restraint, and arguably attempted kidnapping." I swallowed hard. "And if I pressed charges?" "They would be arrested and likely face serious consequences. Your sister-in-law in particular, her actions toward your baby could result in felony charges." I closed my eyes, trying to think clearly through the fog of postpartum hormones and emotional trauma. My husband and his family I understand, but my parents. I don't know why they sided against me. Detective Morgan's expression softened slightly. "Family dynamics can be complicated. But that doesn't excuse what they did. You need to think about what's safest for you and your son now." After she left, I spent the day caring for Aiden and trying to make plans. The social worker helped me secure temporary housing at a women's shelter with private family rooms. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe and would give me time to figure out next steps. That evening, as I was preparing for sleep, my phone, which had been silent all day, lit up with a text from Mark. "We need to talk. I'm outside the hospital." My heart raced. Part of me wanted to see him, to make him understand, to fix whatever had broken. But another part, the part that had watched him stand by while his sister hurt our son, knew better. I called the nurse's station instead. "My husband is apparently outside the hospital. I don't want to see him." Security was notified, and I turned off my phone, focusing on Aiden's peaceful sleeping face instead. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain: my son would never be hurt by those people again. The paternity test results came back 3 days later, while I was settling into the small but clean room at Hope House, the women's shelter. Dr. Lewis called personally. "Amanda, I have the results. Mark is unequivocally Aiden's biological father. The genetic match is clear and conclusive." Despite having known this all along, I burst into tears of relief. "Thank you. Can you send me official documentation of that?" "Already being prepared. I've also notified Detective Morgan at your request." I thanked her and ended the call, looking down at Aiden, who was awake and gazing up at me with those newborn eyes. "We knew all along, didn't we?" I whispered, kissing his forehead. The shelter director, Teresa, helped me connect with a family law attorney who offered pro bono services. Camille Jackson was a formidable woman in her 50s who listened to my story without interruption, her expression growing increasingly stern. "First things first," she said when I'd finished. "We need protective orders for both you and Aiden. Then we address custody and support. The paternity test is excellent, it undermines any claim your husband might make that you were unfaithful." "What about pressing criminal charges?" I asked hesitantly. Camille's eyes were steady. "That's entirely your decision. But yes, there are grounds for criminal charges against all parties involved, particularly your sister-in-law and husband." I nodded slowly. "I need to think about it." "Of course. But we need to move quickly on the protective orders." Later that evening, after feeding Aiden and settling him in the portable bassinet provided by the shelter, I opened my laptop. I hadn't checked social media since before giving birth, focusing entirely on survival and caring for my son. But now, I needed to know what was being said. My stomach dropped as I logged into Facebook. Multiple posts from Mark's family members, all variations on the same theme: that I had cheated, that the baby wasn't his, that I had somehow trapped him. Most painful were the comments from people I thought were friends, expressing shock at my supposed betrayal. No one had reached out to hear my side. I was about to log off when a message notification appeared. "Rachel, my friend from college." "Amanda, what the hell is going on? Mark's sister is posting all this crazy stuff. Are you okay? Call me ASAP." Tears blurred my vision as I dialed her number. When she answered, the sound of her familiar voice broke the dam, and I sobbed as I told her everything. "Jesus Christ," she breathed when I finished. "That's insane. They assaulted you and the baby? In the hospital?" "Yes," I whispered. "I have nowhere to go, Rachel. I'm in a shelter." Her response was immediate. "Come here. I have the guest room, and Boston is far enough away from them. Come stay with me until you get back on your feet." "I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering. More than offering, I'm insisting. My goddaughter needs to be somewhere safe with people who love her." I hesitated. It's a godson, actually. Aiden. There was a pause, then Rachel laughed. Well, damn. Guess I'll have to return the pink onesies. Aiden is a beautiful name, and I can't wait to meet him. Now, when can you fly out? Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in days. I need to talk to my lawyer first. Make sure it's okay to leave the state with Aiden. Do that. And Amanda? This isn't your fault. None of it. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet room, watching Aiden sleep. Maybe there was a way forward after all. The next morning, I called Camille and explained Rachel's offer. It's generally not a problem to relocate with a child before custody proceedings begin, especially given the circumstances, she said. But we should file for emergency temporary custody before you leave, just to be safe. How soon can we do that? I can file today. Given the police report and hospital records, I think we have a strong case for emergency orders. I felt a wave of relief. And what about my job? My things at the house? One step at a time. Let's get the custody order first, then we can arrange for you to retrieve essential items with a police escort. True to her word, Camille filed the paperwork that day. 2 days later, we appeared before a judge who reviewed the evidence, including the hospital security footage, and granted emergency temporary custody of Aiden to me, along with temporary restraining orders against Mark, Melissa, Diane, and Richard. What about my parents? I asked Camille afterward. Her eyes were gentle but firm. Do you want them to have access to Aiden? I thought about my father's red face as he shouted for them to take me out, about my mother's silent complicity. No, I said finally. Not right now. Then we'll include them in the orders. The judge also authorized a police escort for me to retrieve essential belongings from the house. That afternoon, with 2 officers beside me and Aiden in his carrier, I returned to what had been my home for the first time since giving birth. The house was empty, thankfully. I moved quickly, grabbing clothes, important documents, a few sentimental items, and Aiden's things. As I packed the nursery items we'd so carefully selected together, tears streamed down my face. One of the officers, a woman not much older than me, touched my arm gently. Take your time. We're here. I nodded gratefully, carefully folding the baby blanket my grandmother had knitted before her death last year. Some things couldn't be replaced. As we were loading the last of my belongings into the police cruiser, a car screeched into the driveway. Mark jumped out, his face contorted with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? He shouted, storming toward us. The officers immediately stepped between us. Sir, stay where you are, the male officer commanded. There's a restraining order in effect. A restraining order? This is my house. And these are court-authorized removal of belongings, the female officer stated calmly. You need to stay back, or you'll be in violation of the order. Mark's face flushed dark red. Amanda, he called over their shoulders. You can't do this. We need to talk. I clutched Aiden's carrier closer. There's nothing to talk about. You stood by while your sister assaulted our son. While your mother called me a whore. I was shocked. I wasn't thinking clearly. But now I've had time to process. The paternity test confirmed what I always said. I cut him off. Aiden is your son. But you chose not to believe me, to believe in me. That's something I can never forget. His expression changed, softening into contrition. The test results came back. He's mine? The female officer looked disgusted. Sir, step back now or you'll be arrested. Mark retreated a few steps, but kept talking. Amanda, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Let me make it right. For a brief moment, I wavered. This was the man I had loved, the father of my child. But then I remembered his face in that hospital room, the disgust, the immediate assumption of my guilt. It's too late, I said quietly. Goodbye, Mark. As we drove away, I didn't look back. That chapter of my life was closed. 2 weeks later, Aiden and I boarded a plane to Boston. He was a surprisingly good traveler, sleeping for most of the 6-hour journey. When we landed, Rachel was waiting, tears in her eyes as she embraced me carefully, mindful of the baby between us. Let me see this little man, she said, peering down at Aiden's face. Oh my God, he's gorgeous. And the spitting image of you, by the way. I laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. Everyone says he has Mark's eyes. Rachel studied him critically. Maybe the shape, but that's definitely your nose and chin. She looked up at me. Not that it should have mattered either way. No, I agreed. It shouldn't have. Rachel's apartment was spacious by Boston standards, a two-bedroom and a converted brownstone in Jamaica Plain. She had prepared the guest room with a crib and changing table, and even hung a handmade mobile above it. Rachel, this is too much, I protested, taking in all she had done. She waved me off. My godson deserves the best. And so do you. Now, I've taken 2 weeks off work to help you settle in, and I've researched the best pediatricians in the area. I hugged her tightly. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. That's what friends are for. The next few weeks passed in a blur of baby care, legal consultations over the phone with Camille, and slowly establishing a new routine. Rachel was a godsend, helping with Aiden when I needed rest and giving me space when I needed to process my grief. Because that's what it was, grief. I was mourning the loss of the life I'd planned, the family I thought I had. One night, after Aiden had finally fallen asleep, Rachel and I sat on her small balcony, glasses of wine in hand. The Boston skyline glittered in the distance. I still can't understand it, I said softly. How could they all turn on me like that? So quickly, so completely? Rachel took a sip of her wine, considering. I've been thinking about that a lot. And I have a theory. I'm all ears. I think this was brewing for a long time. The way you've described Mark's family, especially Melissa and Diane, they never really accepted you. They just tolerated you. I winced. She wasn't wrong. There had always been tension, little comments, exclusions from family discussions. But I tried so hard to win them over. As for your parents, Rachel continued, you've told me they always prioritized appearance over reality. They care more about what people think than about the truth. Again, accurate. My parents lived in a small town where reputation was everything. My mother was president of her garden club, my father was a deacon at their church. Appearances mattered more than anything. So when Melissa created this narrative, it was easier for everyone to believe it than to question it, Rachel concluded. Mark included. I swallowed hard. But why would Melissa do that in the first place? What does she gain? Control. Attention. The chance to hurt you. Rachel shrugged. Some people are just toxic, Amanda. They need to make others miserable to feel powerful. We sat in silence for a while, the night air cool on my skin. You know what the worst part is? I finally said. I keep having these moments where I miss him. Where I think, I need to tell Mark about this thing Aiden did. And then I remember. Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand. That's normal. You're grieving a relationship that was real to you, even if it wasn't what you thought. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. I'm so scared, Rachel. I don't know how to be a single mother. I don't know how to start over. One day at a time, she said firmly. And you're not alone. You have me. And soon, you'll have a whole new community here. True to her word, Rachel began introducing me to her friends, other young professionals in Boston, many of them parents themselves. There was Thomas and his husband Michael, who had twin daughters through surrogacy, Zoe, a single mom by choice with a 3-year-old son, and Kristen, a pediatric nurse with endless practical advice about baby care. They welcomed me without question, creating a safety net I desperately needed. No one asked intrusive questions about why I'd left Philadelphia so suddenly, though I eventually shared the bare outline of the story with them. That's criminal, Thomas had said, his normally jovial face serious. Actually criminal. It is, I agreed. And there might still be charges filed? Michael, an attorney, had nodded. You should consider it? For your son's protection, if nothing else. I was thinking more and more about that, pressing criminal charges. Not out of vengeance, but because the thought of Melissa ever being near Aiden again terrified me. What kind of person would hurt a newborn baby? What might she do in the future if there were no consequences now? In late October, when Aiden was 6 weeks old, Camille called with news. The court date for the permanent custody hearing is set for November 15th, she informed me. Mark has hired an attorney and is contesting the emergency orders. He's seeking joint physical custody. My stomach dropped. He can't be serious. After what happened? His claim is that he was in shock, that he reacted poorly but has since come to his senses. He submitted affidavits from character witnesses attesting to his good nature and parenting potential. What about the hospital footage? The police report? Those are still our strongest evidence, Camille assured me. Along with the paternity test results, which undermine his claim that he had reason to doubt you. I'm confident, Amanda. But you will need to appear in court. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. I'll have to come back to Pennsylvania? Yes. The case has to be heard in the jurisdiction where the child was born and where you both resided. But it should just be for the day of the hearing. After hanging up, I paced Rachel's apartment, Aiden sleeping in his swing. The thought of seeing Mark, his family, possibly my parents, made me physically ill. But there was no choice. I wouldn't risk losing custody of my son. That evening, Rachel helped me book flights and a hotel room near the courthouse. I'm coming with you, she insisted. Someone needs to be there with Aiden during the hearing. I hugged her, overwhelmed with gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you. Fortunately, you don't have to find out. She smiled. Now, let's talk about your future here. Have you thought more about the job opportunities I mentioned? Before Aiden, I'd worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm in Philadelphia. Rachel, who was in HR for a tech company, had been quietly putting out feelers for remote work opportunities. I admitted. The freelance position with EdTech Solutions sounds promising. 20 hours a week, all remote. I could work during Aiden's naps and in the evenings. Perfect, Rachel beamed. I'll set up a virtual interview. And have you thought about where you might want to live when you're ready to move out? The question caught me off guard. I haven't gotten that far yet. No rush, she assured me. You're welcome here as long as you need. But when you're ready, there are some great family-friendly neighborhoods in Medford and Malden. More affordable than Boston proper, good schools, lots of parks. The idea of having my own place again, of creating a real home for Aiden and me, was both terrifying and exciting. Could I really do this? Build a whole new life from scratch? That night, as I fed Aiden his late-night bottle, I studied his face, eyes growing more alert each day, the curve of his cheeks, the tiny dimple in his chin that was indeed so like Mark's. We're going to be okay, I whispered to him. Somehow, we're going to be okay. The next day, I received an unexpected email from Detective Morgan. Mrs. Carter, I'm following up regarding the incidents at St. Mary's Hospital on September 12th. The district attorney has reviewed the evidence and believes there are grounds to pursue criminal charges against Melissa Carter for assault on a minor, and against Mark Carter, Diane Carter, Richard Carter, Gerald Thompson, and Patricia Thompson for assault and unlawful restraint. However, as the victim, and parent of the minor victim, your input is valuable to this decision. Could we speak by phone at your convenience? Detective Lisa Morgan. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Criminal charges. Against all of them. Including my parents. I forwarded the email to Camille, asking for her advice, then called Detective Morgan. Thank you for getting back to me so quickly, she said when I reached her. I wanted to explain the situation fully so you can make an informed decision. I appreciate that. What exactly would happen if charges were filed? Each party would be arrested and booked. They'd appear at an arraignment where charges would be formally presented and bail set. After that, there would be various pretrial hearings. Most cases like this end in plea deals, but if it went to trial, you would need to testify about what happened. I swallowed hard. And Aiden? As he's an infant, he obviously wouldn't testify. The hospital footage and medical records would serve as evidence regarding the assault on him. What kind of penalties would they face if convicted? It varies by individual and by charge, Detective Morgan explained. Melissa Carter faces the most serious charges. Assault on a minor is a felony that can carry jail time. For the others, first-time offenders often receive probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. I see. I took a deep breath. Can I have a few days to think about this? I'm preparing for a custody hearing, and I need to consider how criminal charges might impact that. Of course. Take the time you need. After hanging up, I called Camille and discussed the potential implications. Criminal charges against Mark could strengthen our position in the custody case, she noted. However, it might also make him more combative. It's a judgment call, Amanda. I spent the next few days weighing the decision carefully. I wasn't motivated by revenge despite everything. I didn't want to destroy their lives. But I did want justice. I wanted them to face consequences for what they'd done. Most importantly, I wanted to ensure Aiden would be protected. In the end, I called Detective Morgan back. I want to press charges, I told her. Against all of them. I understand, she said solemnly. We'll proceed with the arrests. I should warn you that this will likely become public. I'm prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was just how public it would become. 3 days later, Rachel burst into the apartment, her face flushed with excitement. Have you seen this? She thrust her phone at me. On the screen was a local Philadelphia news website. The headline made my stomach drop. Family arrested after newborn assault at St. Mary's Hospital. Below it was a picture of Melissa being led out of her workplace in handcuffs, followed by separate photos of Mark, his parents, and my parents during their arrests. The article detailed the allegations that Melissa Carter had physically assaulted a newborn in the maternity ward, while 5 other family members assaulted and unlawfully restrained the baby's mother. It didn't name me or Aiden explicitly, referring only to the victims, but anyone who knew us would make the connection. It's already all over social media, Rachel said. People are outraged. Sure enough, when I checked Facebook, the story had been shared hundreds of times. Comments ranged from disbelief to fury, with most people expressing horror that anyone would hurt a newborn baby. Former friends from Philadelphia were posting shocked statuses, many reaching out to me directly with messages of support and apology for having believed the earlier lies about my infidelity. Amanda, I had no idea. I'm so sorry I didn't reach out sooner. Are you and the baby okay? Just saw the news. I can't believe what happened. Please let me know if you need anything at all. I feel terrible for doubting you. I should have known better. Sending love to you and your little one. It was vindicating but also overwhelming. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Eventually, I turned it off, focusing instead on Aiden, who was blissfully unaware of the chaos his birth had created. That evening, as Rachel and I were preparing dinner, her phone rang. She checked the caller ID and frowned. It's a Philadelphia area code. Don't answer, I said quickly. Too many reporters had been calling her, trying to reach me. She nodded and let it go to voicemail. A minute later, she listened to the message, her expression changing from wariness to surprise. You might want to hear this, she said, handing me the phone. I played the voicemail, startled to hear Sarah's voice, the nurse who had intervened at the hospital. Hello, this is Sarah Miller from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm trying to reach Amanda Carter. I have some information I think she would want to know regarding her case. Please call me back at this number. I returned the call immediately. Amanda, thank you for calling back, Sarah said warmly. How are you and Aiden doing? We're okay, I said, surprised by how good it felt to hear her voice. We're staying with a friend in Boston for now. I'm glad to hear that. The reason I'm calling, well, I saw the news about the arrests. And there's something you should know. Something I didn't tell the police initially because I wasn't sure if it was relevant. What is it? I asked, my curiosity piqued. The day before you gave birth, I overheard your sister-in-law and mother-in-law talking in the hospital cafeteria. I recognized them later in your room. They were discussing how they could prove the baby wasn't your husband's. My blood ran cold. What? You mean they were planning this before Aiden was even born? It sounded like it. Your sister-in-law specifically said something like, no matter what the baby looks like, we'll say it doesn't look like Mark. I thought it was odd at the time, but I had no context. It wasn't until the incident in your room that I made the connection. I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly weak. Why would they do that? I can't be sure, Sarah said gently. But they also mentioned something about a trust fund. That if you were out of the picture, someone, I assume your husband, would have access to money he currently didn't. A trust fund. It clicked into place. Mark's grandfather had left him a substantial trust, but with conditions. It would fully mature on his 35th birthday, which was coming up in December, or upon the birth of his first child, whichever came first. But there was a fidelity clause. If Mark's wife was proven unfaithful, he could divorce her without splitting the assets. I'd always thought it was an antiquated, strange provision, but Mark had assured me it would never be an issue. Now I understood. If they could prove I had cheated, that Aiden wasn't Mark's, he could divorce me without giving me any part of the trust, which had to be worth several $1,000,000. Sarah, would you be willing to tell this to the police? And testify if needed? Absolutely, she said without hesitation. I've already called Detective Morgan and left her a message. What they did to you and that beautiful baby was unconscionable. After thanking her and hanging up, I immediately called Camille to share this new information. She was as shocked as I was. This changes things, she said. It suggests premeditation, a financial motive. It strengthens both the criminal case and our position in the custody hearing. They planned to hurt my baby, I whispered, the reality of it still sinking in. Before he was even born, they planned to hurt him to get money. I know it's painful to hear, Amanda. But this information will help ensure they face appropriate consequences. I hung up and walked to Aiden's crib, watching him sleep peacefully. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd experienced before, a fierce, protective fury that these people had seen my innocent child as nothing more than an obstacle to money. Rachel found me there, tears streaming down my face. "Hey, what happened?" she asked softly. I told her what Sarah had revealed, my voice shaking. "Those monsters," Rachel hissed. "And I thought I couldn't despise them more than I already did. I just don't understand how Mark could be part of this. The man I married, or thought I married, would never hurt a child for money." Rachel put her arm around my shoulders. "People can hide their true selves for a long time, Amanda. Especially when there's a lot at stake." I nodded, wiping away my tears. "Well, they've shown their true selves now. And they're going to regret it." The following week was a whirlwind. Sarah's statement to the police led to additional charges of conspiracy and attempted fraud against Melissa and Diane. Mark claimed he hadn't been part of the planning, but evidence from his phone showed text messages discussing the plan with his sister in vague terms. My parents, meanwhile, had been released on bail and were maintaining a public silence. Their attorney issued a brief statement saying they had misunderstood the situation and regretted their actions. Too little, too late. The custody hearing was fast approaching, and despite the criminal charges, Mark was still pursuing joint custody. His new claim was that he had been manipulated by his family and deserved a chance to be in his son's life. "Is that even possible?" I asked Camille during our prep call. "He's facing criminal charges for assaulting me." "It's unlikely he'll get physical custody while charges are pending," she assured me. "But courts generally favor keeping both parents involved when possible. Our job is to show why that's not in Aiden's best interest." I spent hours preparing my testimony, rehearsing the painful details of what had happened in that hospital room. Rachel helped me select an outfit that struck the right balance, professional but not cold, maternal but not overly emotional. The night before we were set to fly back to Philadelphia, I could barely sleep. I kept imagining facing Mark across the courtroom, seeing his family, possibly my parents. Would I fall apart? Would I be strong enough? "You've already survived the worst part," Rachel reminded me as we packed our bags. "You protected Aiden in that hospital room. You've built a new life. This is just one more step." She was right, I knew. But still, the anxiety gnawed at me.